In this pottery video, Jan Schachter demonstrates step by step how she makes lidded vessels with interesting pulls. Hello, this is Don Hall. This is at Don Hall Works YouTube channel. And I'm with Jan Schachter here in, what's this place?
Portola Valley.
Portola Valley, yeah, Portola Valley,
Not just
California.
Portola.
And Jan's going to make a lidded jar for us. And so say hello, Jan.
Hi, great to see you. This wheel is like 45 years old or something too. And they're amazing, you know how these hold up? But this is a little bit not level anymore.
I have the same wheel. Only I have a low.
Yours is on the ground. Even before it got popular to stand, I had somebody put the legs on this for me. Now you can buy the legs, but then I had to get somebody to do it. It's supposed to be better for your back.
Yeah, I heard that.
So for those who are interested, I work with B-Mix with Grog, which I find to be a very nice adaptable clay for what I like to do. And I do use a mirror. I don't know how many of you guys use mirrors, but I find it's very helpful to see the profile, the outline. So it just helps you to get that form the way you want. And some of my favorite little tools. This little one. You just kind of clean up the outside. It does get rid of throwing rings, but sometimes if I have really nice throwing rings, I'll leave them. So the trick, obviously you just want a nice clean top for the lid. Cut through a little bit here on the bottom. And I tend to go, I don't know what the dimension is, but just a little bit inside, so there's a little bit of play, because the shrinkage is going to be different on this than it would be when you're throwing the lid. You throw the lid quicker, so this top is going to be a little bit wetter. So I just get close. I can't even tell you, maybe it's 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the inside. And then I put that down very carefully so it holds its shape. And then I can just cut the piece off the wheel. If it's a bigger piece, I would be throwing it on a bat. But on a small piece like this, I can just throw it on the wheel. And then I take my, whatever these are called, grabbers, and I can lift it off. Okay, so now I've got the clay for the lid, which I put on the wheel. Gotta center it, like everything else. And it's always that trick to figure out how much clay you need for a lid for a certain size pot, and you just kind of get the hang of it. I do a pretty big overhang on my lid, so I have to allow for that too. So the lids aren't as tiny as you kind of might think they would be. centered and ready to go. And then I take this kind of a tool, which is just a very, I don't remember, I've had it for so long, just a really nice curve, and I've got lots of different tools with curves like this to make that inner curve that will be the inside of the lid, and open it up, and I can check the thickness of the lid with my pen tool to make sure it's about the right thickness, that I'll be able to cut it off without damaging the lid. But I do almost always check it, because I get close, but I figure this way I can do it a little bit better. And then you start to go underneath to raise that lid portion, and then pull it out a little bit. Okay, so I take my calipers that were sitting here, and they were exactly measuring the size that I wanted for the inside, and of course I got plenty of room to play here, but that gives you a sense of how much extra I have, and maybe it's too much. And then I take my little, what do we call these? Shim. And I just start to press in and leaving on edge, and keep going in and going in and going in till I think it's sort of where I want it. And then I take the calipers again and see if I'm close. Oh, I'm right about right. So then I can kind of gussy this up a little bit. Make the inside section that's going to go inside the pot a little bit taller, and I'm going to use this wonderful little tool to flatten the rim, the outside edge of the lid, and to get this nice and smooth here. One more time with this to get rid of any marks, and then maybe I'm going to check the width again, so it's just about perfect, which is sort of amazing. And then I feel like it's a little tiny bit wider than I would like it to be, and it's also a little bit not perfectly round, so I'm going to cut off the very edge of this to make it a little bit less wide of a rim, and also to even it out a little bit. So if you get that off a little bit, then just gussy up the edge a little bit and get rid of the extra water that's in here. And it's ready to, I use this tool again to just undercut a little tiny bit there at the top of the lid, and then I take my wire, cut it off, and use the same tools, these little lifters, to lift it off. I have a second wheel, this one, which I just use for trimming, and I like to sit at, because I think it's good for your body to be able to stand and to be able to sit and not to be doing one position all at one time. So I have this wonderful little chair that can move with me, and then I have to center, and so I got it centered, and then I just take a little bit of clay to hold it in place. I know there are other mechanisms for doing it, but this is what I do. And And since I know I'm not putting a foot on this one, I'm just kind of cleaning up the bottom, that it doesn't need too much work. And obviously, the big trick with trimming is getting it to be the right moistness, not too dry and not too wet. So I'm just kind of cleaning up the bottom, and I trim it until the bottom has a little bit of a give to it. But that's based on me knowing the moisture in the clay. So if you were really good, you would barely have to trim anything at all. You would have it just right. But I guess this bottom was a little thicker than I thought. So I'm doing more trimming. And more. See if we're getting close now. A little bit, tiny bit more, and I'll be over there. One more. And then I just, because I like the look of it, and also for when I'm glazing, having an edge like this, I only glaze to the area where it's cut, and that way it leaves me room for the glaze if it's, hopefully it won't run. So I just finish it off with this tool again, finish off the bottom, smooth it as much as I can, get rid of the sharpness that would be here, and then it's ready to go. The only other thing I do on this bottom is put my stamp. So I have this little tool that I can't use it for everything when I'm using my stamp, but it does give support on the bottom of a pot. So when I'm using my little stamp for my mark, it gives support in the bottom. So I put a stamp, and then I also sign Jan Schachter. Just with a rotten ballpoint pen. And then afterwards, I do press it in a little bit, because you want the bottom to have a little bit of a curve in, because if it's got anything of a curve the other way, it's going to rock. So the bottom is done.
Now Jan puts the lid on and begins to trim.
So I use this Kemper trimming tool pretty much for everything. And I just kind of like it. When it wears out, it gets too thin, I buy a new one. And I want to get, the whole idea on this is to get kind of a nice domed curve. And I actually, again, I'm working with a mirror so I can see the profile of it. And I can see that it's got a little bit of a unevenness to it, but I think that's the nature of the beast, and we'll see how it goes. I can adapt it somewhat and fix it a little bit. And then again, I test the thickness to make sure. Obviously, it's a visual thing of you want the look, and it's based on what you think you threw. But you don't want it to be too heavy, because people are gonna, if they wanna, interested in purchasing it, and they pick up the lid and it weighs a ton, and they're like, it just feels disproportionate to what it should be. They don't want a lid that's too heavy. And I don't want it too thin, because I do have to put the handle on it, and it'll distort. Pressing down on the handle is going to distort the top of the lid if it's too thin. So it's getting the balance between being too thick and too thin. A little bit more. Let's see. Yeah, Still a tiny bit more. It's got the right curve, but it's a little bit thicker than, which means not that the appearance will be that much different, but it's more the weight. So trying to make it not too heavy. Okay, I think we're getting close. Take a tiny bit more off the top. I do care a lot about getting a curve that is just kind of right for the handle I'm going to put on it. All right, that's good. Okay, so then I take this tool again and smooth the top and even the curve and get rid of the trimming marks. So it's a nice smooth look. And then I also like, it's just an aesthetic thing, I do a little bit of a foot in here that I like the look on the rim, to just have a little bit of a setback like that at the edge. And then I just soften the curve again from the cut, and it's ready to go. So now it's ready to get a handle. This is a finished piece. That is what this one is going to look like. It's going to wind up being probably a little bit bigger, but it's the basic idea. You can see it this way and this way. And I'm going to explain to you how I get that and do this and all the rest of it. So in order to make these handles, I need to extrude these coils out of my super duper clay extruder. And I do a bunch of them at a time, so I just have them ready to go and I keep them wrapped up in plastic, and then they're ready whenever I need them. And then if they get a little dry, I can just spray them with a water sprayer to rehydrate them a little bit. But these are ready to go. So I'm just going to lift one of these off here, and I just kind of eyeball what I think is the right size. So I cut one that's about right, and put this one back to put it away. Get rid of the scrap, and then gussy up the edge a little bit where I've cut them, and get a slight bit of a curve on the handle. It's all just on appearance. So as this one has, this is the handle part here, but then I have to get the clay that I'm going to use to wrap it and hold it and attach it. So I've got to go get that clay. And I use two different clays for that. One is this, which is Black Mountain. This is, no, it's not. It's it's something called DC Red that I don't even know if it's available anymore, but it's a reddish clay, because on something with a white glaze, I don't want the contrast of this wrapper to be too extreme. So on the darker clays, I use a darker wrapper than this one is. So I'm going to go now and get the clay for the lighter handled wrap. And I know that this amount of wrap that it needs to wrap around is 4 1/4 inches. So I can actually measure that length with my ruler, and then use a little bit of slip on it like that. And then what I do is I take this handle off and I eyeball the middle of it and the top, and I score it just a tiny bit. And then I take this prepared handle with this wrapper and I eyeball again for it to be in the center. And if I'm not really happy with it, I can even measure, like this is that 1.5 millimeter, and this is the same. So it's really centered. Sometimes I think it is, and then it's not. And then I take it and I wrap it around, and I put a little more slip right here where it's going to join, and also where it's going to attach to the bottom of the handle. So you can see by having the exact dimension, it comes out exactly a perfect meet. Then I put a little bit more slip here, and I've got this scored. So I set this on here, and because I do want it to be right in the center, I will use a ruler or tape or whatever, and I'll measure this side. So this is a little bit over 4 1/4, and this is not quite, so I have to move it over. That's 4 1/2. And that's still not quite right. 1/2. And that's why I have it on this little turntable. Okay, so that's good that way. And then I want to measure it this way. And it's perfect. So now I've got it on the center of the pot, and then I just, again, having it up a little higher so I can see it from the side, and then I can just press it down that little bit so it adheres with the slip to the top of the lid, and get it all level this way and level this way, and then it's all done. And then I'll put it off to dry, and I do cover the whole thing with plastic overnight just so that it dries more evenly, and it hopefully won't crack and fall off.
So that's that.
So in order to make those handles, I use this extruder. This is a very old extruder, and I actually have hand cut the dies like this so that those handles are joined together and they won't spring apart when they dry and fire. So I extrude them as a group, and I can extrude the different sizes depending on the size of the pot. And then that will go under here, and then this is the extruder that pushes the clay down through these into these long tubes that create these. And I do them in a pile, so I have a whole bunch ready to go whenever I want to put a handle on.
Thank you, Jan. That was really informative. Please, everyone, visit Jan's website, janschachter.com, and think about subscribing to this channel.